Hello, everyone, and welcome to
That's my opinion!
My name is BaconBearzz, and that's my opinion, and welcome to today's episode. Thank you for supporting our quest in world domination once again, and today we're going to be talking about the Kouri Richins case, Kouri Richins and Eric Richins, which has just broke recently as of May 9th. Also, I'd like to remind everybody that we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time, and this is just my opinion based off of public-based information. So today's highlight comment comes from Donna Rouse, and she says, they couldn't live without the money. They wanted easy wealth, and the poor victims were in the way. And that's referring to the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case. And as we know, in Housekeeping, we'll put these two things together. Lori Vallow has been found guilty on all charges. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, or you want to know what I'm talking about, I will link it up in the cards somewhere up here. Also, if you guys can see my Dear Mommy card, it is Mother's Day. This is what I've decided to do with my Mother's Day, is sit in my office and talk to you guys with a little bit of silence and enjoy myself. And then I'm going to go bowling with my kids. But that's besides the point. I agree with that. I think it was about the money. I think it was about her being with Chad. And I think it's all disgusting. And I did a live reaction to the verdict. And verdicts always make me very uncomfortable. Even with the Alex Murdaugh case, I absolutely felt that he should be guilty. But watching another person get their life taken away from them and have them in prison, it just doesn't feel good. I always feel like a guilty verdict should feel better than it does. And it doesn't. Nobody wins. There are no winners. Everybody loses. It's all terrible and it's all tragic. So with that being said, we're going to talk about some even more tragic stuff, which would be the Kouri Richins and Eric Richins case that has just broke recently. So I will be posting this on May 18th. On May 19th, there will be something significant coming out, which I will tell you as we get in the case because I don't want to take too much of it away. And with that being said, let's get started. Grief is a funny thing. We've all experienced it in our own ways, and it's so hard to cope with as an adult. But as a child, how do you explain to a child the concept of death, of grief? Well, 33-year-old Kouri Richins seems to have figured that all out after going through a tragedy of her own. Her husband, Eric Richins, of 9 years, would pass away unexpectedly in 2022, leaving her with not only grieving on her own, but helping her 3 young boys also get through this process. But she managed to find a way through words and creativity. Kouri Richins would write a children's book called Are You With Me?, which was released on March 7th, 2023, almost 3 days, a year and 3 days after her husband tragically passed away. And according to an Amazon description, the book's purpose is to create peace and comfort for children who have lost a loved one. There is even a picture of her late husband, Eric Richins, with angel wings on the cover of the book as a sweet tribute to him. Kouri Richins has been on TV interviewing and promoting her book and singing the praises of Eric Richins, a loving, doting father and a wonderful man who was taken before his time. On May 9th, 2023, we would see Kouri Richins in headlines again, and not for her children's book on grief and losing a loved one, but because she's being charged with aggravated murder and 3 counts of second-degree felony possession with intent to distribute a controlled substance. On May 19th, 2023, she is scheduled to make her first appearance in court. So that's what I was telling you guys about earlier. Today should be May 18th when I release this, and on May 19th, she will be seeing court for the first time. But how did we get here? And like always, let's start at the beginning. According to a woman named Linda King, Kouri and her worked together at Home Depot where Eric Richins would frequent. Linda says that the guys that Eric worked with would always come in and tell her that Eric liked Kouri, and he was too scared to ask her out. But Linda said after some coaxing, that's exactly what he would do. And after that, the rest is history. Reports from her and other statements I've been able to find have said that their marriage looked absolutely perfect. One friend even saying it was quote unquote picture perfect. But others, including Eric's family members, would tell you that it was far from that, even so far as telling law enforcement that if anything ever happened to Eric, Kouri was the one to blame. But why would they think this? Why would Kouri be their number one suspect? I know a lot of times we look at the spouses first, but why is everybody so adamant about Kouri? Well, it could be because records say that red flags were raised years ago. In fact, when Eric's sister claimed that Kouri and Eric went on a trip to Greece where she would give him a drink and Eric would become violently ill. He then later called her and said he thought that Kouri was trying to kill him. Now, I have to say, if my husband served me food or a drink, my first thought would not be that he was trying to kill me. So I know that this is coming out extremely recently, and I know that we're going to get a lot more details. We'll probably end up getting the 911 call and things like that. But my curiosity becomes, what is it about that instance that makes Eric think that Kouri is trying to do something to hurt him? Records would also say that Valentine's Day 2022, 1 month before his death, Kouri brought Eric a sandwich, and after eating it, Eric broke into hives and could not breathe. He actually used his son's EpiPen and Benadryl before passing out for several hours. He then later called his business partner telling him what happened. Now, I know that you're not supposed to use an EpiPen if it's not prescribed to you, which can be very dangerous. But also taking Benadryl because he's obviously having some sort of anaphylactic reaction, right? Isn't that also a red flag? Your husband passes out from having a reaction to something for several hours and nobody's notified. Also, even if you are prescribed an EpiPen, aren't you supposed to seek medical attention even after you use it? There's a lot of things happening that's red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag here. But unfortunately, in the early hours of March 4th, 2022, 39-year-old Eric Richins was found unresponsive inside of his home at the foot of his bed. Kouri was the one to find him and call 911. At 3:22 a.m., Summit County Sheriff's deputies and EMS would arrive at the home where they would find Eric at the foot of his bed. Life-saving measures were attempted, but unfortunately, Eric was declared deceased. Kouri told investigators that she brought Eric a celebratory Moscow mule because they were celebrating the fact that she had closed down a home. She was a real estate agent, and I believe from what I was able to find, she owned a business herself. So she didn't work for anybody else, but she had closed down a house. She wanted to celebrate with Eric, so she brought him a drink in bed where he drank it. After bringing him the drink, she claimed that she slept in one of her kids' bedrooms because they were having trouble sleeping, or what she says was a night terror. And when she woke up at 3 a.m., she found Eric was cold to the touch. Now, I do have to say in a lot of these instances, because I try to put myself in the brain of the investigator, right? Is this a plausible explanation? For me, as a mother of two, this is. So our rule in our house is that you have to go to sleep in your own bed. So my husband will put my daughter to sleep and I will put my son to sleep, which I can explain why it has to happen that way. But my son seems to think that my husband is playtime. So whenever my husband tries to go to put him to sleep, my son amps up. So I have to be the one to read him a book and calm him down and put him to sleep. But anyways, this to me, okay, I understand. I bring my husband a drink. My child is having a problem in their room. I go, I put them to bed. And a lot of times when I'm putting my son to bed, I will fall asleep in his bed because I'm tired. And then I get up in the middle of the night and then I go back to my own bed. Kouri would also tell investigators that she left her phone in the bedroom while she was with her son, but they would later find out that that's a lie, because the phone had been locked and unlocked while she was in the child's room, allegedly. It would also show movement, which, what a weird thing to lie about. Just say you took your phone with you and that you were texting and that you were awake or whatever. Because when I'm in my son's bed and I am waiting for him to fall asleep, I always have my phone. I'm scrolling TikTok or YouTube or whatever. But that's right. There were a bunch of texts that had been deleted. And in this case, I feel like this was don't look at my phone. I didn't take it with me. Don't worry about it. You don't need to look at my phone. There's nothing in there. Also, at this day and age, isn't that the first thing that everybody looks at is your phone? I feel like if there's ever a time where investigators need to look at anything, it is going to be the phone. Always the phone. The phone tracks your movement, which we saw in the Alex Murdaugh case. He said that he was sleeping, but his phone had picked up 200 something steps in a certain amount of time, equating to 70 steps a minute. He was sleeping, but also running. There's so many things that they can figure out. Reports state that she claimed that she performed CPR on him, but it would appear that she didn't because from the amount of blood that ended up coming from his mouth. So obviously we don't have access to the 911 call just yet. That might be something that is released later. I don't know if Sometimes dispatch will say, okay, EMS is on their way. Let's try to perform CPR. We don't know if that was the case. We don't know if she called 911 and was like, oh, I already tried CPR. But that was something that alerted investigators and EMS right away, because they're like, wait a second. With the amount of blood that was around him, if she had performed CPR, there should have been some sort of evidence of her doing that. An autopsy would show that Eric had died from an overdose of fentanyl. The medical examiner would say that it was about 5 times the lethal dosage and that it was an illicit drug and not medical grade. But the other weird thing is Eric had no other drugs in his system. So it's not like it could have been some sort of laced opiate or anything else that was laced with fentanyl. It was strictly fentanyl. The other thing is his family, and the reports that I had read and heard, was that Eric took very good care of his body, was trying to be healthy, was just, very aware of his health. He was not a drug user. So this was something that was like another red flag to investigators immediately. After the autopsy and toxicology report came back, a search warrant was obtained for their home, which included Kouri's phone and several computers. This is when they would find CL, who was in Kouri's phone, and CL was identified as an acquaintance of Kouri's. During the investigation, this acquaintance would come forward telling them that Kouri had asked them if they could get her some prescription pain meds. She wanted pain medication for an investor who had a back injury. After getting Kouri hydrocodone, Kouri would ask for something, quote unquote, stronger. And I quote, some of the Michael Jackson stuff. And this acquaintance was able to get Kouri 15 to 30 fentanyl pills. Kouri went to CL's home and paid $900 for fentanyl. And this is all according to the Kouri Richins warrant, which can be obtained online. 3 days after the interaction, Eric and Kouri were eating dinner when Eric would start to get extremely sick. And it was allegedly then that he told a friend he thought his wife was trying to kill him. A couple of weeks after that, Kouri would ask the same acquaintance, CL, for more fentanyl at $900. And it was about a week after that, about 6 days, that Eric would be found deceased in his own home. But why? Why all of this with a loving husband and a beautiful home and a good job and 3 beautiful children? Well, it seems to be what we see time and time again. And that's money. And how much money to be exact? $3.6 million. 2 months before Eric tragically passes away, Kouri had tried to change his life insurance policy that he had taken out with his business partner. She tried to make herself the sole beneficiary. Apparently, you could get into this online and make some changes that way. And according to reports, she logged into Eric's life insurance policy, the buy-sell agreement with his business partner, and changed it from each other's beneficiary to her as the only one. But joke's on Kouri, because the insurance company calls Eric and they're like, hey, listen, we noticed that you had your business partner as the sole beneficiary to your life insurance policy, but somebody logged in and changed it to Kouri Richins. And Eric is like, absolutely not. And then ends up somewhere in there changing it to his sister without Kouri's knowledge. So at this point, Kouri thinks that she is entitled to his life insurance policy. On March 3rd, it was said that Kouri and Eric were arguing over buying a $2 million home. Kouri wanted to flip it, but Eric was going to tell her the next day that he wasn't going to sign the papers, which obviously makes sense. At this point, when Eric had found out about the life insurance, he was also deciding that he was going to file for divorce. This was enough. But he has 3 sons that he has to take care of. And from all the reports that I could find, Eric was the best dad. He was their coaches on their teams. He was involved in their lives. He was a part of their schooling. He was just the best father. So, of course, he didn't want to make any rash decisions, right? And also, I have to assume if you're in a position where you think that your wife is doing something to you, I have to assume that you're also worried that if you do anything rash, does she have the capability of doing this to her sons? So with wanting to file for divorce, right? and changing the life insurance policy and starting to get all of his ducks in a row, the last thing that this man is going to do is buy a $2 million home with this woman. Because if he does plan on getting divorced, that's just another asset that they're going to have to fight over. So he decided, he's like, listen, like, I'm going to tell her tomorrow that I'm not going to sign these papers. But Eric would never get that chance, because on March 4th of 2022, he was found tragically gone in his home. And if you think that this story couldn't get any worse, you're wrong, because people like Kouri Richins always get worse. Because on March 5th, Kouri Richins would sign the closing papers of this $2 million home on her own. Less than 48 hours of finding her husband deceased in her home while her children are there, she then decides that next business day to go and sign papers to close on a $2 million home. But don't worry, just in case you were worried, it gets worse. She then has a huge party at her home where she was allegedly drinking and celebrating. Who came to this? I just want to know, did they have meats and cheeses? Did they have shareable dishes? Who came to this? And what was she telling people when they were like, hey, are you okay? Because either A, people know that Eric is deceased, or B, they didn't know. And what is she telling them then? He's on a business trip? He's on vacation? Also, where are the kids? Like, your kids were in the home when you called EMS for your husband. Where are they? And why are you not with? I'm asking this question like I'm surprised. I mean, she murdered her husband, allegedly. She hasn't been found guilty yet. But I'm just saying, where are your kids and why are you not with them? Anyways, 2 weeks later, she then tries to flip the $2 million home for $5 million, which would also make sense because she's not getting any of Eric's life insurance money because it's now with his sister. And he wanted to set it up in a way that it would make sure to take care of his boys so that that money could bypass her. Her book, Are You With Me? About grief and coping, is now been removed from Amazon, which also good. Now, a couple of questions right off the bat that are being asked, and I want to address them personally. I've seen some news interviews that have really just made my stomach turn. There have been a lot of news anchors that have been covering this case that have been like, why hasn't he left? Why is he doing what? We don't victim blame here. You have a man who was married to a woman he thought loved him, number one. And number two, this was a man who absolutely loved his children and he would do anything for them. And he didn't leave because he wanted to make sure that if he did get divorced, that they would be set up for success. And unfortunately, he just didn't make it that far. You know, I find it so interesting that because this was a man, we go, why didn't he leave? Why was he still there? But if it was a woman who was in a domestic abuse situation, people don't ask about the women and why they didn't leave. They say, we understand that domestic abuse can be also mental abuse. This was a man who was in love with his children. This was a man who was married to a woman he thought loved him. And this was a man who, yes, even though he was thinking about divorce, was going to set his sons up for success. Everyone has described him as the most loving father, the most engaged father, a loving husband, even though maybe his marriage wasn't as picture perfect as we thought it was. And he was doing everything that he could the right way. And, you know, I had this conversation with Lydia, who you've seen on the podcast before, and we were just talking about it, and she brought up a really great point. She said that if this was a woman who had left with her kids, nobody would bat an eye. Nobody would question. But if a man were to leave and the woman were to stay with the kids, we'd be like, why did he leave? What's the deal? Like, so many questions are asked. The point of the matter is, Eric had found himself in a domestic abuse situation where he was worried about his own safety. And what does that look like if you piss her off? Because if he does something that pisses her off, does she have the capability of doing something to the kids? You have to put yourself in their shoes. Why didn't they leave? For reasons unknown to us. Because we're not married to Kouri Richins. Because Eric thought he was doing what was best for him and his sons at the time. And for news anchors who are reporting this publicly, That is not ever something you should put it out there as, why didn't he leave? He's a victim, period. Secondly, so many people are asking, what took so long? Why did this take so long to arrest her? He passed away on March 4th. Why did it take May 9th, 1 year later, to arrest her? Maybe because investigators wanted to get all their ducks in a row. Maybe so that they could have a case with a ton of physical evidence against her so that she couldn't weasel her way out of this. It's, I feel like sometimes, because some people think that Law and Order is like an hour long, they also think that cases should be that long, and that is not the case. An autopsy takes days, if not weeks, to get the results. Toxicology, same thing. Investigations, warrants, interviews, evidence, all of these things take time. I actually don't think this was a long time. I actually think a year is a super short amount of time to make an arrest. I think a year after losing your husband is a short amount of time to write a book, get it illustrated, and get it published, and be able to do a press tour 1 year and 3 days after your husband has passed away, while also allegedly grieving in the process, while also supposed to be taking care of your 3 sons. There are some things that have really just annoyed me about this case, and I think it would be a very different scenario if it was flipped and we were talking about a man and a woman. But the point of the matter is, a victim is a victim. It doesn't discriminate, and neither should we. But with closing, Kouri Richins, who wrote a children's book about grief, about coping, about helping her 3 young boys because she wasn't able to find anything to help them, will be seeing court tomorrow, and we will see what happens for detention. This is a shorter episode. I am going bowling with my kids for Mother's Day, so I will go and enjoy that and also beat all of them because I think it's important to teach your kids how to lose. But other than that, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. This is a really short case. Do you guys like the shorter ones, the longer ones? What do you feel? What do you want? What do you want? You tell me what you want and I'll give it to you. With that being said, don't forget that you can like, subscribe, share. You hear everybody. They're leaving right now. I really need to walk out this door. Don't forget that you can like, share, subscribe. You can donate in a monetary way if you want to. Anyways, I just love the fact that you guys are here all the time and that we get to talk about these things. Let me know what you think about this case in the comment box down below. And other than that, my name is BaconBearzz, and that's my opinion.